This show started with a cheerleader and ended with a stake through TV norms. Another gave us aliens, conspiracies, and one unforgettable theme song. From supernatural teens to sarcastic sitcoms, these are 12 unforgettable 90s TV shows that changed TV history. 12 Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It started as a campy horror show about a teenage girl staking vampires after school. But Buffy the Vampire Slayer didn't just survive, it slayed. Premiering on the WB in 1997, no one expected much. A vampire-fighting cheerleader sounded like a punchline. But within a few seasons, Buffy was facing demons that had nothing to do with fangs, loss, betrayal, growing up, and that aching feeling of being chosen for something you didn't ask for. Sarah Michelle Gellar brought grit and heartbreak to Buffy summers. One week, she was saving the world. The next, she was falling apart in silence after her mom died. The show wasn't afraid to take risks, like suddenly giving Buffy a sister in Season 5 with no explanation, until the story unraveled in a way that somehow made total sense. It was messy, emotional, and unforgettable. And even with some behind-the-scenes controversy years later, Buffy changed what teen TV could be. Without it, you don't get the Vampire Diaries, Stranger Things, or any supernatural drama with actual emotional weight. Buffy walked into that dark alley first and left the door wide open. 11 Twin Peaks. It started off with a haunting image, a homecoming queen found dead, and from that moment on, nothing about television felt normal again. Twin Peaks hit the airwaves in 1990 and turned a small-town mystery into something no one had seen before. Sure, it started with the murder of Laura Palmer, but the show was never really about solving the crime. It was about diving into a town where nothing made sense, and that was exactly the point. Suddenly, primetime was filled with dream sequences, cryptic giants, and a log that might, or might not, be talking. One moment, you were laughing at a slice of cherry pie. The next, you were trapped in the Red Room, listening to a man speak backwards while time collapsed in on itself. At the center of it all was Agent Dale Cooper, played with wide-eyed wonder by Kyle MacLachlan. He wasn't your average detective. He meditated, followed intuition, and treated every clue like it was part of something cosmic. And the town? It was packed with eccentric characters that felt like they belonged in a dream you only half remembered. But when the network forced the mystery to wrap up early, the magic slipped. Viewers left. The show vanished. And yet, it never really died. Twin Peaks became a legend, a blueprint for bold experimental TV that didn't care if you understood every moment. It made space for shows to be strange, slow, and deeply personal. And when it returned 25 years later, it didn't try to recapture the past. It shattered it. The return wasn't a reunion, it was a rebirth, filled with quiet dread, long silences, and a finale that left audiences stunned and speechless. More than a show, Twin Peaks felt like stepping into another dimension, one where television didn't explain itself. It just dared you to keep watching. And we did. 10. The XFiles. It had aliens, mutants, conspiracies, and 2 FBI agents who couldn't agree on much, but together they made TV history. When The X-Files premiered in 1993, science fiction on network television was barely hanging on. It wasn't trendy. It wasn't taken seriously. But this show didn't care about trends, it cared about the truth. And suddenly, a whole new world opened up on Friday nights. David Duchovny's Fox Mulder was obsessed with uncovering what the government was hiding, believing in everything from alien abductions to psychic powers. Gillian Anderson's Dana Scully, a medical doctor with nerves of steel, was the rational anchor, assigned to keep Mulder in check. But the magic was in their chemistry. The push and pull between belief and doubt made every episode feel like a battle between science and the unknown. Some weeks, it was a standalone monster of the week. Think stretchy serial killers, invisible predators, or parasitic bugs. Other times, it went headfirst into a sprawling mythology involving alien colonization, black oil, double agents, and smoking men with way too many secrets. And while the storytelling sometimes got tangled, fans didn't mind. They were deep in the hunt. The internet was still in its infancy, but the X-Files helped build one of the first real fandoms online. Fans swapped theories on forums, picked apart clues from grainy VHS recordings, and debated every detail like their lives depended on it. And every time that eerie whistling theme kicked in, it felt like you were entering something bigger than just another episode. It felt like you were entering a phenomenon. The show ran for 9 seasons, spawned 2 feature films, and even returned years later for a revival. But the real impact was the door it kicked open. Shows like Fringe, Supernatural, Lost, and even Stranger Things all owe something to the X-Files. It proved that serialized mystery, sci-fi horror, and deeply human characters could all live in the same story. And yeah, maybe the truth is still out there, but thanks to the X-Files, at least we know how to look for it. 9 Freaks and Geeks. It only lasted 1 season, but somehow said more in 18 episodes than most shows do in 10 years. Freaks and Geeks dropped in 1999, took one look at glossy teen dramas, and said, nah. Set in a high school in the early 80s, it followed two siblings just trying to survive adolescence. Awkward crushes, terrible parties, bad haircuts, and all. No heroes, no slow-motion makeovers, just real messy teenage life. Created by Paul Feig and backed by Judd Apatow, the show was honest in a way that made you cringe and relate. It didn't try to make high school cool, it showed how weird, confusing, and painful it really was. NBC didn't know what to do with it. Bad time slots, barely any promotion, and boom, canceled. But the cast went on to rule Hollywood. Seth Rogen, Jason Segel, Linda Cardellini, James Franco. Almost every face became a star. And the show they started on? A cult classic that proved teen stories didn't need to be perfect, they just needed to be real. 8. Babylon 5. This show didn't just go to space, it mapped out the whole journey before launch. Babylon 5 hit the air in 1993 and did something wild for the time. It had a plan. Not just season to season, but 5 years of twists, wars, betrayals, and payoffs, all set on a giant space station where humans and aliens tried, and often failed, to get along. Political backstabbing? Check. Galactic war? Yep. Creepy shadow monsters pulling the strings? Oh yeah. Creator J. Michael Straczynski wrote it like a book, with real consequences. When a character made a choice, it stuck. When a battle was lost, it hurt. And unlike the usual problem of the week format, every episode pushed the bigger story forward. It even used early CGI before it was cool or, good looking. But at the time, it was next level. It didn't pull blockbuster ratings, but it didn't need to. Babylon 5 was the blueprint for smart, serialized sci-fi. Without it, shows like The Expanse and Battlestar Galactica probably wouldn't exist. 7. Friends. It started as just another Thursday night sitcom, but ended up defining what a sitcom could be. When Friends premiered in 1994, nobody knew it would turn into a cultural landmark. The setup was simple. 6 single adults figuring things out in Manhattan, drinking way too much coffee. But it had something most shows could only dream of. Instant chemistry, every line landed, every interaction felt real. And somehow, every character stood out without stepping on each other's laughs. It wasn't just the punchlines, it was the rhythm. The way Chandler's sarcasm bounced off Joey's cluelessness, the way Monica's intensity collided with Rachel's spoiled optimism, the way Ross tried so hard to be the grown-up and still ended up spiraling. And Phoebe? She was in a world of her own, and somehow always the wisest one in the room. The writing was sharp, the timing was gold, and the audience showed up every single week. It became a ritual. People planned their nights around new episodes, and over time it became more than entertainment. It became a kind of shorthand for real life. Your messy roommate was a Joey, your sarcastic coworker was a Chandler, your on-again, off-again drama, straight up Ross and Rachel. What made it last, though, was the heart. For all the jokes and gags, the show knew when to slow down, when to say goodbye, when to take a risk. Streaming brought it back, but Friends never really left. It's the comfort rewatch, the background noise while folding laundry, the go-to when nothing else feels right, and decades later, it still delivers laughs, memories, and a reminder that life might not always go as planned. 6. Living Single. Before Friends took over the coffee shop, Living Single was already running the block. Premiering in 1993, it followed 6 black friends living in Brooklyn, juggling love lives, careers, and plenty of hilarious drama. Queen Latifah led the crew, and every character brought something different to the table. It was smart, it was stylish, and it was full of heart. It didn't get the massive promo push other shows did, but it didn't need it. Living Single connected. The jokes hit, the stories felt real, and fans still ride hard for it to this day. Friends showed up a year later with a very similar setup, but this show, it came first. 5. Frasier. It was a sitcom where therapy jokes met slapstick chaos, and somehow it was magic. Frasier took a bar regular from Cheers and gave him a brand new stage, a call-in radio show in Seattle. Suddenly, Dr. Crane was dishing out life advice to strangers while barely managing his own mess. At home, his ex-cop dad moved in with a recliner that clashed with every fiber of Frasier's polished existence. And his brother, Niles, just as dramatic, just as snobby, and always ready to one-up him in style. The genius was in the balance. 1 second, you're laughing at a Shakespeare reference. The next, Niles is fainting at the sight of blood. And somehow, it all clicks. It didn't just flirt with highbrow, it dove in, then tripped over a coffee table and made you laugh anyway. It racked up Emmys like it was nothing, setting a record that held for years. But what made Frasier last wasn't just the clever writing. It was the awkward dates, the sibling spats, and the moments that showed even the most sophisticated people are just trying to hold it together. 4. Saved by the Bell. If you were a kid in the 90s, this show was your Saturday morning ritual. Saved by the Bell gave us Zach Morris and his brick-sized cell phone scheming his way through Bayside High with a wink and a smirk. But behind the hallway pranks and goofy freeze frames, the show had something else, real lessons. One week it was teen crushes and cafeteria food fights. The next it was addiction, peer pressure, or heartbreak. Jesse Spano's "I'm so excited" meltdown burned into every kid's brain. It was cheesy, sure, but it didn't flinch when things got serious. It spun off into college years and a reboot or two, but the original left a mark. It reminded us that growing up is awkward, stressful, and weirdly funny. And sometimes, that's enough. 3. And then there was Mr. Show with Bob and David. This wasn't your average sketch show. It was weird, wild, and didn't care if you got the joke right away or ever. Running on HBO from 1995 to 1998, Mr. Show starred Bob Odenkirk and David Cross before they blew up. The sketches didn't start and stop, they melted into each other like a fever dream. One minute you were watching a courtroom parody, the next you were in a fake infomercial with a goat on fire. And somehow, it all made sense. It wasn't built for mainstream laughs. It was for the misfits, the comedy nerds, the ones who love strange humor with a sharp edge, and it quietly launched a comedy dynasty. Jack Black, Sarah Silverman, Tom Kenny, all came through its doors. Even now, you can feel its fingerprints on everything from Tim and Eric to I Think You Should Leave. It didn't chase the spotlight. It lit its own, then made you sit in the dark and laugh anyway. 2. Space Ghost Coast to Coast. This show took a forgotten cartoon, chopped it up, and made something so weird it actually worked. Space Ghost Coast to Coast launched in 1994 on Cartoon Network and somehow turned a washed-up superhero into the most awkward late-night host ever. Real celebrity guests, ridiculous questions, long silences. It was like watching a talk show that got hijacked by your sleep-deprived imagination. It made no sense, and that was the magic. The jokes were slow, the editing was chaotic, and the vibe was totally off. But if you got it, you really got it. Adult Swim wouldn't exist without it. Neither would Aqua Teen Hunger Force, The Eric Andre Show, or half of the weird internet humor we see today. Space Ghost felt like finding a glitch in the system. It was bizarre. It was brilliant. And once you saw it, you never forgot it. Finally, at number 1, Seinfeld. It was the show about nothing that somehow became everything. When Seinfeld premiered in 1989, no one expected much. No life lessons, no heartwarming hugs, just 4 New Yorkers being petty, awkward, and oddly relatable. Jerry was chill. Elaine was chaotic. George was a walking meltdown. And Kramer? A full-blown cartoon in human form. The plots were weird, the jokes were sharp, and somehow every episode added a new word to the pop culture dictionary: shrinkage, double-dipping, close talkers, yada yada yada. It didn't follow the rules, it didn't care. And that's exactly why it worked. By the time it wrapped in 1998, Seinfeld had become the king of sitcoms. Over 75 million people tuned in for the finale. And even now, it still hits just as hard. No fluff, no morals, just brutally funny honesty about how ridiculous people really are. And honestly, that's kind of timeless. So what made these 12 shows unforgettable? It wasn't just the theme songs, the catchphrases, or the reruns. They dared to be strange, smart, bold, or just totally different. Which one was your favorite? Or which one do you still rewatch on loop? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more throwbacks just like this.